This is the ground zero entry of a series of videos detailing the process of leaving the cult of the SJW. Yep, it's a cult. I'm not using that word to be like, eek, a cult! Dun dun dun! But observationally, I think it's a sound conclusion, and I'll pin that down later in the video. But if you're watching, and you're still both vegan sneakers and My Little Pony hair entrenched in the culture, you aren't going to get anything out of this. So just carry on with your bad self. Ah, shit. I think I just appropriated there. Don't worry. Cross my heart and hope to die. I promise I'll go out later and get a black person to punch me in the tits. If, on the other hand, you're in the culture but you've started to question, if you've got the niggle, I'm hoping this series will be useful to you. So, the niggle. I've been a leftist SJW type most of my life. It was kind of the default. Highly academic family, women's studies mother, active in the LGBT community, and generally an outspoken voice for equality in my personal life. Yeah, I was that kid in school who stood up for other kids who were getting their faces rubbed in the dirt. So I'm the perfect fit for social justice warriorhood, right? I am the best mark ever for a movement which claims to want to further and enlighten humanity. But I always had this niggle. This niggle that noticed girls weren't punished with the same severity as boys. This niggle that noticed a gravitation to outright bigotry by my peers, anti-breeder, anti-Christian, anti-right, without any supporting arguments or recognition of individuality, reason, or nuance. This niggle that began to notice, when it came to race relations, the information being presented by the mainstream media was incomplete and slanted. I was a brown shirt, but I was always a reluctant brown shirt. I did occasionally voice opposition to some of the more egregiously irrational stuff, but my punishment for doing so, both social and tangible at times, was swift and severe. So, for many years, I held my tongue and got along to get along. But this niggle as Jiminy Cricket is a very apt comparison. It starts out as a quiet hum in the background, but grows more and more insistent as time passes, the temperature rises, and the justification of the left's platform spirals into crazy town. The reaction to Dr. Warren Farrell's talk at the University of Toronto was my breaking point. That is the moment I realized the movement I was part of had catapulted out of reason and argument into the stratosphere of bullying, street-fighting tactics, and intimidation. And then I took a really hard look at what it was I had actually been advocating for, from an unemotional and rational perspective, and I found so many holes in the rhetoric I felt stupid for ever having believed it in the first place. I just never really thought about it. Maybe you've come to the same point. You look around, and all of your friends and circles are SJW. You're in the culture of using the words privilege, ciscentric, microaggression. You're constantly hearing about how the us is good and the them is bad. And it has stopped making sense to you, but you can't really put your finger on why. And there's no safe way to question, dissect, and analyze those beliefs with others, at least not here in Canada, where free speech, which has never really been guaranteed, that is a uniquely American gift, is dwindling ever further into a memory. Well, first, don't feel bad about being part of this culture. There are some damn good reasons why you ended up there in the first place. Most notably that the SJW paradigm is now the dominant paradigm in North America, so you have likely been marinated in it from junior kindergarten on. And even more reasons to stay where you are. If you're a woman, why on earth would you advocate against the extra stuff you currently benefit from in North America, like affirmative action for jobs and school, reduced prison sentences? If you're a man, Why would you willingly expose yourself to the endless torrent of insults you will receive for suggesting that not all women who make rape accusations should automatically be believed? And if you're trans or gender fluid, why would you distance from the community that keeps chirping about how special you are? The answer is that staying in this culture guarantees you will eventually become a victim of it. The left always eat their own. I'm not going to tell you you have a duty to society to stand up and tilt at Mizzou windmills. I'm not going to mock you as a blue pillar. I'm not going to tell you that challenging these beliefs is a duty you have to protect those you love. I'm not going to appeal to your altruism. I'm appealing to your most basic drive to survive and your own long-term self-interest. Because this is a cult, and we all know how those stories usually end. Let's compare the social justice warrior movement with Jim Jones. You may have heard of him. The Jonestown Massacre. A bunch of people killed themselves. Yeah. You can always Google this. This isn't actually about Jim Jones, so I'm going to leave a lot of this in the realm of y'all can Google it, but I'm using it as an example to illustrate the similarities. As Sci-10 Atheist's video compared feminism with Islamism, I'm going to compare SJW with Jonestown. So, first, let's establish what makes up a cult. I'm skipping the dictionary definition to go to a source more dedicated to an investigative approach. Cultwatch.org defines it, both in terms of non-Christian and Christian dogma. Obviously, we're not talking about the Christian interpretation, so let's look at the non-Christian one. Quote, a group that uses manipulative, psychological, mind-control techniques to recruit and control their members. These techniques might be love bombing, instant friends, or emotional blackmail. At extremes, it might include keeping people away from their friends and family and isolating them both physically and emotionally. A side-by-side comparison of Jim Jones' People's Temple, which, by the way, culminated in the deaths of about 300 children and 600 adults in November of 1978. That's where we get the term drink the Kool-Aid, FYI. The more you know. Anyway, it bears an eerie resemblance to the current media tactics employed by the regressive left. Jim Jones was rejected from the mainstream status quo. He was working from a position of being, quote, considered trash, therefore victimhood. He focused his attentions on poor, non-white neighborhoods. And here we have check your privilege and yes, all women. Jim Jones promised a better life if they joined. And here we have page after page of being on the right side of history. Jim Jones preached equality and socialism. He had a platform of inclusivity, tolerance, and community. I don't really think I need to list examples of this, as this is the entire raison d'etre of the SJW movement. Jim Jones exploited his congregation for money. I, again, think this is fairly obvious. Jim Jones said that opponents needed to be silenced or censured. Now, he did it at the barrel of a gun that very same day in 1978. But in the SJW movement, it's a little more subtle. We have bomb threats, swatting, doxing, taking Milo Yiannopoulos off Twitter, and the case of Gregory Allen Elliott. So I think it's fairly clear there are some comparisons here. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that the SJWs are suddenly going to see Anita Sarkeesian make cyanide Kool-Aid, and we all must kill ourselves. But do you remember Piss for Equality? I do. And even though it was quite a clever hoax by some top-shelf trolls on 4chan, if you were there on Twitter and Facebook as it was happening, you know damn well there were people taking it dead seriously. If you can get people to piss their pants for you, what else can you get them to do for you? Most human beings have a need to virtue signal. Religion has filled this need quite well for millennia. It's why religion does so well. If you do X or don't do X, you are a good person. If you do Y or don't do Y, you are a bad person. As religion, well, at least Christianity, has fallen into decline in the West, a new religion has risen up to tell people who is good and who is bad. And, of course, when religion and politics start fucking, they become a nearly unstoppable power couple. When SJWs say, we're on the right side of history, they're absolutely correct. If by right side they mean the winning side, theirs is already the dominant paradigm. It is you who will be swimming upstream and opening yourself up to attack and censure. I remember Stefan Molyneux, who, if you're not familiar with yet, I highly recommend listening to some of his podcasts. I'll put a link in the low bar. He characterized where we are in the cycle of history as late-era Caligula, which I think is spot on, if I'm being honest. It's going to get worse before it gets better, if it even does get better. And there are some actions, such as the massive influx of migrants from a culture that is explicitly opposed to some of our most fundamental Western values, which can't be taken back once the horses are out of the barn. If you decide to start speaking up, you are going to be called a racist, sexist, fundy Christian, misogynist, conservative, Islamophobic, transphobic, homophobic, colonialist, culture-appropriating, privileged piece of shit, whether there's any objective truth in those labels or not. You will become the enemy of people you once called your peers. And you know how they treat their enemies, don't you? Of course you do. Maybe you even did some of this yourself. You know they are going to win because they don't care about the rules. It's like trying to sit down to play chess with someone who, when they begin to lose, jerseys you and steals the chessboard, and then pisses on it, and then burns it, and then puts the ashes in your gas tank. This is the virtue paradox. The side stubbornly clinging to idealized versions of dignity and honor will always lose against the side willing to shamelessly do anything to win. If you want to win, you have to be prepared to get your hands dirty against a dirty opponent. But you also must walk the line of rules of engagement so you don't become a monster yourself. It's a total mindfuck. That's why a degree of dissociation from the emotional is necessary when planning strategy. I'm going to read a passage from the second revised edition of Strategy by B.H. Littlehart to illustrate this point, but to offset any glazed expressions, I'm going to put up a series of pictures of very attractive people while I read. Boobs! I know. I'm awesome, and I love you guys. So, in the chapter, The Concentrated Essence of Strategy, Littlehart writes, quote, "You cannot hit the enemy with effect unless you have first created the opportunity. You cannot make that effect decisive unless you exploit the second opportunity that comes before he can recover. The importance of these two problems has never been adequately recognized, a fact which goes far to explain the common indecisiveness of warfare. The training of armies is primarily devoted to developing efficiency in the detailed execution of the attack. This concentration on tactical technique tends to obscure the psychological element. It fosters a cult of soundness rather than of surprise. It breeds commanders who are so intent not to do anything wrong, according to the book, that they forget the necessity of making the enemy do something wrong. The result is that their plans have no result. For, in war, it is by compelling mistakes that the scales are most often turned." So you're about to get your hands dirty. But I can tell you that niggle does not go away on its own. Some people call it cognitive dissonance, others call it conscience, but it will not go away until you listen to it. That's why I'm doing this, to help others quiet the niggle by facing it head on. Each video is going to feature someone who cuts through the bullshit and offers a compelling intellectual platform, swords and shields to hopefully help you get to a position of strength in the philosophical arena. Because if you want to take on the social justice hate machine, you're going to need to wear a cup and be prepared to take a punch to the head. Thanks for listening.